There is a quiet kind of loyalty that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need promises carved into stone or dramatic declarations spoken under the moonlight. It simply exists, steady and patient, like a hand that remains extended even when the other person is tired of holding on. This kind of loyalty is born from a very specific place, the memory of being loved without conditions. When someone stays loyal to you because of that, it is not because they fear losing you, nor because they are dependent on you, but because something inside them learned what safety feels like in your presence. Unconditional love leaves a mark that time cannot erase. It is not loud or controlling. It doesn't say, "I will love you if you become better," or "I will stay as long as you meet my expectations." Instead, it says, "I see you as you are, and I choose you anyway." When someone experiences that kind of love, it settles into their nervous system. It rewires the way they understand connection. They no longer associate love with performance or fear. They associate it with rest. And once a human being learns where they can rest without being judged, without being abandoned, without being diminished, they rarely forget it. Loyalty grows in spaces where people don't have to pretend. When you loved someone without conditions, you gave them permission to be real. You allowed their flaws to breathe. You didn't weaponize their mistakes. You didn't keep a scorecard of their worst moments. You understood that they were human before they were impressive. That kind of acceptance creates a deep sense of belonging. And belonging is the soil in which loyalty naturally grows. Not forced, not demanded, not begged for, just grown. People often misunderstand loyalty. They think it is about control, about obligation, about staying no matter how unhappy you are. But true loyalty doesn't feel like a cage. It feels like a choice that is renewed every day. When someone is loyal to you because you love them without conditions, it is because being with you reminds them of who they are when they don't have to defend themselves. They don't feel smaller around you. They don't feel like they have to earn their place. They feel anchored, not trapped. Unconditional love teaches a person that they are worthy even in their mess. It teaches them that their value is not erased by their bad days, their fears, their inconsistencies. When you loved them in moments when they couldn't love themselves, you became a reference point in their heart. Later, when life becomes confusing or relationships become complicated, their mind remembers you as the place where love didn't come with a price tag. That memory becomes powerful. It becomes a reason to stay loyal even when staying is not convenient. There is also something deeply humbling about being loved without conditions. It softens people. It disarms them. When someone realizes that you saw their shadows and still chose them, it creates a quiet responsibility inside their heart. Not the heavy responsibility of guilt, but the gentle responsibility of gratitude. Loyalty born from gratitude is strong. It doesn't fade easily. It doesn't disappear at the first sign of conflict. It doesn't run away when things stop being perfect. You didn't love them to make them loyal. You loved them because that was who you were. And that is why the loyalty feels so pure. It wasn't manipulated into existence. It was inspired. People are far more loyal to those who inspire them to be better than to those who demand perfection from them. When you loved without conditions, you inspired honesty. You inspired growth. You inspired trust. And trust, once established, is not easily broken. Think about how rare it is to be fully accepted. Most people spend their lives editing themselves, filtering their words, hiding their fears. They learn early that love often comes with rules. Be successful. Be calm. Be strong. Be useful. Be easy to deal with. When someone finally meets a person who doesn't add another rule to the list, it feels like water after a long drought. That relief turns into attachment, and that attachment, when healthy, turns into loyalty. Loyalty like this doesn't mean blindness. It doesn't mean the person thinks you are perfect. It means they know you are imperfect and still feel safe choosing you. They stay not because they don't see alternatives, but because none of the alternatives offer the same sense of emotional truth. You were real with them. You didn't love an idealized version of who they could become. You loved who they were in the moment. That kind of love teaches people how to stay. There is also a healing aspect to unconditional love. Many people carry wounds from relationships where love was inconsistent or conditional. They learned that affection could be withdrawn as punishment. They learned that mistakes could cost them connection. When you showed them a different way of loving, you didn't just love them, you healed something in them. And people are deeply loyal to those who help them heal, even if they don't always have the words to explain why. Sometimes loyalty shows up quietly. It's in the way they defend you when you're not in the room. It's in the way they remember your values and try to honor them. It's in the way they don't give up on you during your difficult seasons, because you didn't give up on them during theirs. They remember how you stayed when it would have been easier to leave. And in moments when leaving would be easier for them, that memory holds them in place. Unconditional love also creates emotional safety. When someone feels emotionally safe with you, their nervous system associates you with calm rather than chaos. In a world full of uncertainty, people cling to what feels safe. Loyalty, in this sense, is not dramatic devotion. It is the simple decision to return to the place where they don't feel threatened. You became that place for them, not by force, but by consistency. What's beautiful is that this kind of loyalty doesn't fade even if circumstances change. Even if distance appears, even if life pulls people in different directions, the loyalty remains in a quiet form. It shows up as respect. It shows up as care. It shows up as a refusal to speak badly about you, even when they no longer play an active role in your life. Because unconditional love doesn't end abruptly, it echoes. You may not even realize how deeply you affected them. Often, the people who love without conditions underestimate their impact. They think love is supposed to look louder, grander, more visible. But the most transformative love is often the simplest. It is in listening without interrupting. It is in staying calm during someone else's storm. It is in choosing understanding over ego. Those small, consistent acts are what teach someone how love stays. Loyalty born from unconditional love is not transactional. It doesn't keep track of favors. It doesn't say, "I owe you." It says, "I choose you." And that choice feels light, not heavy. It feels like alignment, not obligation. This is why it lasts. Anything built on fear eventually collapses. Anything built on conditions eventually needs renegotiation. But what is built on genuine acceptance stands quietly, firmly, through time. When someone is loyal to you because you loved without conditions, it also reflects something important about you. It means you were brave enough to love without guarantees. You didn't know if they would stay. You didn't know if they would return the same depth. You loved anyway. That courage leaves an imprint. People recognize it, even if they don't consciously name it. They feel it as sincerity. And sincerity is rare enough to be treasured. This kind of love also teaches people how to love others. When you love someone without conditions, you model a way of being in relationships that they may carry forward into the rest of their life. They become more patient, more understanding, more open. And even if they move on, a part of them remains loyal to the version of love you showed them. You become a standard, not in comparison, but in principle. There will be moments when you wonder why they stay. Why they defend you. Why they don't walk away when things get complicated. The answer is simple, even if it feels profound, because with you, they didn't have to earn love. They didn't have to negotiate their worth. They didn't have to be anything other than human. That experience is unforgettable. Loyalty like this doesn't shout. It whispers. It shows up in patience. It shows up in forgiveness. It shows up in the willingness to try again after misunderstandings. It shows up in the way they still believe in you during your low moments, because you believed in them during theirs. Love teaches people how to see each other. And once someone has been truly seen, they rarely walk away easily. You didn't love them perfectly. No one does. But you loved them honestly. You loved them without keeping one foot out the door. You loved them without constantly reminding them of their shortcomings. You loved them in a way that felt stable, not conditional on mood or success. And that stability became a foundation in their emotional world, in a world that often encourages people to be disposable. Unconditional love sends a powerful message: you are not replaceable. When someone receives that message deeply, loyalty becomes a natural response. Not because they feel owned, but because they feel valued. Not because they are afraid of losing you, but because they understand what they would lose. If someone is loyal to you because you loved without conditions, cherish that bond. It is not common. It is not shallow. It is not built on illusion. It is built on shared humanity. It is built on moments of vulnerability that were met with kindness rather than judgment. It is built on the understanding that love is not something to be rationed, but something to be lived, and even if that loyalty is not always visible, even if it doesn't come with constant reassurance or grand gestures, trust that it exists. Unconditional love plants seeds that grow slowly but deeply. Some of them grow into loyalty that lasts a lifetime. Some grow into quiet respect that never fades. Either way, the love you gave was not wasted. It became part of someone's inner world, shaping the way they stay, the way they commit, and the way they choose love again and again. That is the power of loving without conditions. It doesn't just create moments. It creates roots, and even when silence stretches between you, loyalty does not disappear. It simply becomes quieter, more internal, less performative. It lives in the way they still consider your feelings before making decisions. It lives in the way your name still carries weight in their heart. It lives in the way they pause before crossing lines that would dishonor what you shared. This is not loyalty that needs constant proximity. It is loyalty that exists because something meaningful was built. Not because something is being monitored. When you love without conditions, you teach someone that connection doesn't have to be fragile. You show them that love doesn't vanish the moment discomfort enters the room. And that lesson changes how they approach conflict. Instead of running, they try to understand. Instead of attacking, they try to repair. Instead of giving up, they look for ways to stay. Even when they struggle, even when they falter, the instinct to remain loyal has already been planted. There is a certain peace that comes from being loved this way. It allows people to exhale. Many people don't realize how tense they are in relationships until they experience one where they don't have to constantly prove themselves. When you gave them that peace, you became associated with emotional safety. And people are loyal to what brings them peace, especially in a world that rarely slows down enough to offer it. This kind of loyalty also doesn't compete. It doesn't feel threatened by others. It doesn't need to constantly assert itself. Because it isn't rooted in insecurity. It's rooted in understanding. They know what you offered. They know how it felt. And they know how rare it is. That awareness makes them protective of the bond, even if they don't always express it in words. Sometimes, loyalty shows up as patience during your growth. They allow you room to change because you once allowed them the same. They don't expect you to stay frozen in the version of yourself they first met. They understand evolution because unconditional love made space for it. They stay loyal not to a static image of you, but to your essence, even when misunderstandings arise, there is a difference in how they respond. They may be hurt, but they are not quick to discard you. They seek clarity instead of closure. They seek truth instead of escape. Because unconditional love taught them that people are more important than being right, and connection is more valuable than winning an argument, this loyalty doesn't mean they ignore their own needs. It means they trust that those needs can be communicated without fear. Unconditional love creates an environment where honesty feels safer than silence. And when honesty is welcomed, resentment has less room to grow. Loyalty thrives where communication is allowed to be imperfect but sincere. You may notice that they remember small things about you. The way you think. The way you react under pressure. The values you stand for. This attention is not accidental. It's a form of respect that comes from being deeply seen and deeply accepted in return. When someone feels understood, they naturally want to understand you back. That mutual recognition strengthens loyalty in ways that grand gestures never could. Even distance doesn't always break this bond. Physical separation. Time, changing circumstances, none of these automatically erase loyalty born from unconditional love. Because what you shared wasn't dependent on convenience. It was emotional. And emotional truth travels farther than geography ever could. There is also a quiet dignity in this kind of loyalty. It doesn't beg to be acknowledged. It doesn't demand reassurance every moment. It simply exists, steady and grounded. And often, you only realize how strong it is when life becomes difficult. When pressure arrives, when choices become complicated, when people reveal who they truly are, that is when this loyalty becomes visible. Unconditional love also teaches forgiveness. Not blind forgiveness, but compassionate forgiveness. The kind that understands context. The kind that separates behavior from identity. When you offered that to them, you taught them not to define people by their worst moments. And when the time comes, they extend that same grace to you. Sometimes, the loyalty you receive is not loud appreciation, but consistency. They show up. They stay aligned. They don't abandon you emotionally when things stop being easy. They may not always have the perfect words, but their actions remain steady. And in a world obsessed with intensity, this steadiness is often overlooked, even though it is far more meaningful. This kind of bond also survives ego. There is less need to dominate, to control, to prove superiority. Because unconditional love dismantles the idea that love is a competition. It reframes it as a collaboration. And loyalty grows where both people feel like they are on the same side. Even if life eventually leads you down separate paths, the loyalty doesn't turn into bitterness. It turns into respect. It turns into quiet well-wishes. It turns into a refusal to rewrite the past in a negative light just to justify moving on. Because unconditional love doesn't need to be erased to make room for new chapters, you may not always feel appreciated in obvious ways. People who are loyal because of unconditional love sometimes struggle to articulate what they feel. But pay attention to patterns, not performances. Pay attention to who stays consistent when there is nothing to gain. Pay attention to who remains gentle with your heart even when they could walk away without consequences. Loving without conditions is not about losing yourself. It's about choosing compassion over fear. And when someone experiences that from you, it changes how they see commitment. They learn that staying doesn't have to mean suffering. It can mean growth. It can mean learning. It can mean choosing connection again and again, even when it requires effort. The loyalty you inspired is not something you need to hold tightly. It doesn't need constant validation. It exists because it wants to, not because it has to. And that is the most beautiful part. You didn't trap someone with love. You freed them with it. And in that freedom, they chose you. So if someone remains loyal to you, not out of obligation but out of understanding, recognize the depth of that bond. It is not accidental. It is the natural result of love that did not try to control, manipulate, or restrict. It is the echo of kindness that was offered when it mattered most. In the end, unconditional love doesn't promise forever. It offers truth in the present. And sometimes, that truth becomes the very reason someone stays longer, tries harder, and remains loyal in ways that don't always need to be explained. Because once someone has known what it feels like to be loved without conditions, they carry that experience with them. And they honor it, often quietly, often deeply, often for far longer than anyone else can see. And when everything settles, when the noise of expectations fades and the urgency of proving love disappears, what remains is something rare and enduring. Loyalty shaped by unconditional love becomes part of a person's character. It is no longer just about you, it becomes how they move through the world. They learn to stay present. They learn to value depth over drama. They learn that real connection is not found in perfection, but in patience. You may never fully see the ways your love continues to live inside them. You may not witness the quiet moments when they choose kindness because you once chose it with them. You may not hear the internal conversations where your voice becomes the calmer one, reminding them that understanding is stronger than anger. But those moments exist. Unconditional love does not disappear when a chapter ends, it transforms into an inner guide. This is why loyalty like this doesn't turn toxic. It doesn't become obsession or dependency. It allows space. It respects autonomy. It trusts the bond rather than clinging to it. When someone is loyal to you because you love them without conditions, they are not afraid of freedom. They understand that love and freedom can coexist, because you showed them that truth. Even in moments when they disagree with you, there is still respect. Even when they feel hurt, there is still care. Even when they need distance, there is still a line they will not cross. That line exists because unconditional love taught them the difference between protecting their heart and damaging someone else's. You may notice that they hold your vulnerabilities with gentleness. They don't use what you shared against you. They don't expose your soft places to win arguments or gain advantage. That is loyalty at its purest, protecting someone's humanity even when emotions are complicated. There is also a quiet strength in knowing you were safe for someone. That your presence allowed them to lay down their armor. That you were a place where they didn't have to perform or pretend. This kind of impact cannot be measured by how long someone stays or how often they speak your name. It is measured by the way they carry themselves differently because of you. Sometimes unconditional love is misunderstood as weakness. But it takes immense strength to love without conditions in a world that constantly teaches people to love strategically. It takes courage to choose empathy when judgment would be easier. It takes maturity to stay kind when you could become guarded. And when someone recognizes that strength in you, their loyalty is not blind. It is deeply respectful. As time passes, loyalty may evolve. It may look less like daily presence and more like quiet solidarity. Less like constant communication and more like unwavering goodwill. But evolution does not mean loss. It means the bond has matured beyond dependency into something more grounded and honest. If at times you feel unseen or uncelebrated, remember this: unconditional love works beneath the surface. It shapes attitudes. It influences decisions. It lingers in moments of doubt and shows up as restraint, compassion, and integrity. The loyalty you inspired may not always come back to you in obvious ways, but it exists nonetheless. And even if one day you no longer walk side by side, the love you gave will still have mattered. Because unconditional love is never wasted. It becomes a reference point for what is possible between two people. It becomes a reminder that love can be gentle and strong at the same time. In a world that often glorifies intensity and instant gratification, you offered something quieter and deeper. You offered steadiness. You offered acceptance. You offered a love that didn't need constant proof. And that kind of love leaves behind something far more powerful than temporary attachment. It leaves behind loyalty that is rooted in respect. So if someone remains loyal to you, not because they fear losing you but because they remember how you made them feel human, let that be enough. You don't need grand affirmations to validate what you gave. The loyalty itself is the answer. You loved without conditions. And in doing so, you taught someone how love stays, even when nothing else is holding it in place.